You know his words will get you farther than the film will ever go. Give him a moment of your time, he'll tell you what's wrong with the show. He knows what's good, what's bad, what's really bad. His face is just a sign. Say hello to Confused Matthew.
A lot of you have probably already heard by now that this is one of two movies that I've walked out on in my life, so anyone who is a fan of this movie will likely have a bit of apprehension about the hate level of this review. Well, I do have some good news for you in that regard. I did walk out on The Last Samurai, but I'm not sure if that really counts. One of the reasons I walked out on this movie is because the projector screwed up in the theater I was in and the subtitles got cut off. There are a few scenes in this movie that are downright unintelligible without them, and so I naturally got a bit lost. I still believe that I would have walked out of this without the malfunction, but I'll leave it to all of you to decide if this is just a technicality. I can sum up the problem with this movie in two words. John Logan. John. Logan is one of those writers who I have a bit of a soft spot for. It isn't like most of the writers I talk about around here where I think they just plain can't write and I end up hating them for it. I almost feel sorry for John Logan because it isn't as though he is completely void of talent. One of the first movies I ever talked about as Confused Matthew was a John Logan movie, Star Trek Nemesis. This was back when I only talked about one or two aspects of a movie rather than really reviewing them. A lot of people were under the impression that I was defending Star Trek Nemesis as a good movie, but let me be clear, I didn't like any of the Next Generation films enough to defend any of them. My only point in discussing Star Trek Nemesis was that at the very least there were a lot of good ideas within the screenplay that they ended up with. Exactly the same can be said of The Last Samurai, but this is ultimately the tragedy of John Logan's writing. John is a man who will bring to the table a lot of good core ideas that for one reason or another he just can't hammer into a good screenplay. Obviously, The Last Samurai didn't go on to have a reputation as bad as Star Trek Nemesis, but the good idea to poor execution problems are the same in both. Now, I'm sure you've all heard the usual complaints about this movie. It's too formulated. It's too similar to other films. But neither of these things are what bother me about this movie. Just because a movie is either trite or formulated doesn't necessarily make it bad. Dead Poets Society was ridiculously formulated, but still very good. This movie's biggest problem is not that it's too formulated or that it's too similar to other films. This movie's biggest problem is this.
We're never gonna get out of this. We're gonna be killed or go to jail for the rest of our lives.
I just wanted a better life for you and me and the baby.
Jason, you gotta be bigger.
No, Brendan, I'm being pretty big.
Jason, trust me. It's a big line. You gotta say it big.
I'll give it a shot. I just wanted a better life.
Stop. You gotta get bigger than that.
I just wanted a better...
Bigger. It's gotta be bigger than that.
Bigger than that.
Yeah.
Is it bigger? Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted a
Sorry,
better
stop. Bigger. Bigger than that.
Bigger.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Bigger.
Let me hear it.
Alright, you're
Action.
Better life!
Some of you may be laughing right now, but please don't. I'm not joking. I'm dead serious. That is literally what this movie is. This is their go-to strategy of storytelling. Take everything that would have been good enough on its own and overdo the fuck out of it. So the film opens with our main character, Nathan Algren. I really hate this character with a passion, and I'll tell you why. His words and actions throughout this whole film are ridiculously over the top. Everything he says and does is designed to impress you. Well, John, I'm not impressed that you're trying to manipulate me. Had you given me a real spontaneous character that wasn't designed to get one feeling out of me, I might have gone along with this. Too obvious, John. Too fucking obvious. We open with him giving a demonstration of a new rifle on the market. He is a drunk and a loser who is a proclaimed war hero, which sounds good in reputation, but what he had to do in the war apparently screwed him up. You can tell he's brash and doesn't play by the rules because he goes on late and ends up pointing the loaded gun at people in the crowd and shooting at things. Hope you're impressed. So after establishing that we're supposed to be impressed with this guy, we cut to a Japanese army dude. You see, the Japanese army is currently hiring American soldiers to help train their army to combat a group of rebels. Japan is currently making an effort to become more progressive, and the rebels are resisting their efforts. The US is hoping that if they agree to train the Japanese soldiers to combat the rebels, Japan will offer the US exclusive rights to supply arms. Algren doesn't really seem to disagree with this, he just kinda acts weird and leaves the table, so his superior officer goes after him. Oh, his superior officer only has one function in this film, by the way. He basically just exists in order to march in a parade honoring Robot House after they win the regatta. That's a Futurama reference, you might have to Google that one. Long story short, he's the jerk that is plunked into the movie so that he can get his comeuppance in the end. In other words, not a real person. He tries to convince Algren to go along with this, to which Algren responds with the following.
You want me to kill Japos? I'll kill Japos.
I'm not asking you to kill anybody.
You want me to kill the enemies of Japos? I'll kill the enemies of Japos. Rebs or Sioux or Cheyenne. For $500 a month, I'll kill whoever you want. But keep one thing in mind. I'd happily kill you for free.
Damn! No, he didn't! That's right, Bizoy! He told his superior officer that he'd kill him for free. Hope you're impressed. Algren agrees, and he sets off for Japan. In a narration of Algren's journal, he states that he is being hired to suppress and kill yet another tribal leader, and that it seems that this is the only job that he is suited for. Now, let me make it clear what is being established here. Nathan Algren already doesn't want to do this. He isn't confronting and killing another man and his culture because he has a prejudice or preconception about that culture. He's doing it because it pays. This becomes a big problem later in the film, but for now, I just wanted to bring it to your attention. So after arriving in Japan, he is informed of the situation. It seems that the Emperor has become obsessed with the West and is trying to incorporate Western cultures and ideals into his own society. This includes matters of the battlefield as well. A rebel named Katsumoto, who was the Emperor's teacher at one time, is rebelling against this Western conversion because he is true to the old ways, and so he and a band of rebels are fighting against this change. Katsumoto is samurai, who still wears armor and does not believe in using firearms. But so far as Algren is concerned, he's just another enemy that he needs to understand on the battlefield. The men he is training to fight against the rebels are mostly peasants who have never even seen a gun. As he trains them on how to fight, we get a flashback as to why Algren is the kind of miserable man he is. Turns out that his superior officer had him and his company slaughter a village of innocent civilians during the Indian Wars. He participated in the killing of innocent women and children, and must now drink himself into a stupor in order to keep those memories at bay. What I can't believe anyone didn't realize in the writing of this screenplay is that this tidbit of information actually works against the story. As has been made apparent in several ways so far, Nathan Algren is already primed to have a change of heart and a change of sides. I'm getting ahead of myself once again, but I just wanted to point it out before we continue. And now we come to the first of many throw-up scenes in the film. The jerk who exists solely to be a jerk so that he can get his comeuppance at the end of the film informs Nathan that Katsumoto has attacked the railroads on the border, and that now more than ever they have to move against him. Nathan tells him that his men are not ready, but just to be a jerk, his superior officer orders him to move against Katsumoto now anyway. What follows this is a scene that is clearly taken from another scene in another movie, Glory. Now before I go into this, I want to stress once again that I don't have a problem with Logan borrowing a scene from another movie and trying to make the same point that that scene made. My problem is that he's taking what was done in Glory, overdoes the fuck out of it, but worst of all, does it in a way that is stupid and just plain incorrect. To demonstrate this, I have to play you the Glory scene. Now, the situation here is the same as is in The Last Samurai. A band of soldiers are being trained on shooting, and one of them turns out to be a good shot. The problem is that he shot well in an atmosphere that was relaxed. They were all just laughing and having a good time about it. Matthew Broderick's character sees this and decides to put this man to a real test. The thing that makes this scene work is that it starts out quiet, with everyone in good spirits, but the tone seamlessly transitions from good-natured to tense, and finally ends with the point that they aren't as ready as they all thought. Take a look.
Reload. Faster. Faster. Faster! Discharge your weapon. Discharge your weapon. Do it! Now do it again, only this time, I want it done quickly. A good man can fire 3 aim shots in a minute. Major Forbes, give me a Colt revolver. One. Your gun. Give it to me. Faster. Reload. Quickly. Faster. Faster. Load. Faster. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it.
This scene was pulled off masterfully, and it was done without anyone shooting at anyone else, and without any melodramatic music playing in the background letting you know how dramatic this is supposed to be. So with that in mind, here's how The Last Samurai does it.
Load. Mr. Graham! Tell this man to fire at me!
I beg your pardon?
Tell this man, if he does not shoot me, I will kill him!
Captain, if I might have a word.
Tell him! Tell him!
撃たなければ、冷まさめで、撃たれろぞ。早く!
Load!
早く! 早く! 早く!
Load! Faster! Faster!
Shoot me, damn it.
Fire! Fire! Ute! Ute!
Of course, we have to have the over-the-top mindless yelling, the shooting at people who are supposed to shoot at you, and the crappy dramatic music without which we wouldn't know this was supposed to be dramatic. But the fact that knocks this whole scene down is that unlike the scene in Glory, this is a bullshit test of their readiness. This man isn't failing to shoot him because he can't shoot. He fails to shoot him because he's being told to kill his superior officer. I guarantee you that however trained or untrained this man is, he is far more likely and willing to shoot an enemy combatant that's trying to kill him than a suicidal captain that's on his side. And just like everything else in the movie, they just can't let the content of the scene stand on its own, so the whole thing has to be overdone. There's just no way Tom Cruise could have played this scene without going, "Fire! See? I can overact too. And did you notice how much of a badass his character is? Yeah, he's so much of a badass that, of course, he has to be the one that stands in the way of the soldier's gun. Hope you're impressed. Welcome to part 2. So after demonstrating that these guys are useless in battle because they won't kill one of their own, the men are sent out to fight Katsumoto anyway. Everything starts out fine, with everyone in formation, but when they see the opposition coming at them on horseback, everyone panics and starts shooting blind and wild at anything and everything. This would have fit right in as a tactical strategy if they were in the Zion battle in the Matrix Revolutions, but this battle is actually supposed to make sense. Now, I understand that these men are supposed to be untrained and inexperienced, but I have a hard time understanding what all the panic is about in this scene. They outnumber the samurai by at least 2-1, they have guns, and the samurai don't. Based on the math alone, there really shouldn't be anything to worry about. I certainly can't understand the parts of this battle scene involving the peasants running away from the samurai. I don't care how trained or untrained I am. If you are coming at me with death in your eyes, I am not going to run away from you because you are on horseback and you will catch me. If I have a gun and you don't, I am either going to shoot your horse or I am going to shoot you until you are dead. Now, I have never even so much held a gun in my real life, and I have never been in a combat situation, and I understand that everyone reacts to fear differently, especially in groups. So maybe it is plausible that it all would have gone down this way, but it just doesn't seem to make sense to me. So after the clusterfuck, Nathan Algren gets surrounded by the enemy. Now, it has already been established above all else that Nathan Algren has a death wish. So much so that he'll stand in front of a loaded gun and insist that a trainee shoot him. Remember that? Remember how impressed we were all supposed to be about how much he doesn't care if he dies? Well, something must have happened between then and now, because when the samurai surround him, boy howdy does he fight for life. That's like 6 samurai he fights off right there. Even if you want to argue that he at least wanted to give them a fight before letting them kill him, which contradicts the training scene, by the way, then this still flies in the face of what's been established, because even when he is on the ground with no hope of saving himself, he still kills one of them with a freaking flagpole. I don't know about you, but I sure am impressed. Except what happened to the death wish? I guess a wizard did it. Anyway, after seeing Algren fight his ass off the way he did, Katsumoto orders his men to spare him and capture him. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about with regard to John Logan's writing. There are plenty of good elements in this scene, hell, the whole movie for that matter, that are brought down by lousy execution. It's Star Trek Nemesis all over again. Every single big problem with Star Trek Nemesis could have been fixed by a few simple tweaks to the screenplay. Well, that and maybe getting rid of the Nosferatu aliens. Always with regard to a John Logan screenplay, we aren't even talking about anything big. We're talking about simple changes that would have fixed everything. For instance, imagine if Katsumoto witnesses Algren fighting off the samurai just as he did, but then gets surrounded. Once he's outnumbered, he throws down his weapon, spreads his arms, and invites them to kill him. This would have alerted Katsumoto to 2 things. First, that Nathan has the will of the warrior, as was established in the scene we had, but also that he has demons that are holding him back from his full potential. With the scene we actually have, however, what does Katsumoto learn about Algren but that he fights really well? So they take him capture and hold him up in the mountains. As it is winter time, he won't be able to escape or leave until the season changes, so he's going to be here a while. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about what happens when Nathan Algren sits around in the mountains with the samurai. Him sitting around in the mountains with the samurai is pretty much half the movie, so this may seem like a lot to gloss over, but it's actually not. And that's the point. The only thing that happens in the hour we spend with him in the mountains is that he ends up liking the samurai and joining their side. The problem is that only 2 things cause this to happen. First, they take his booze away, which sadly forces him to face what he did during the Indian Wars.
I'll see you tonight when I go to bed in my head movies.
And in addition to facing these atrocities, it also means that he just can't party the way he used to. That's 2 Tropic Thunder jokes in a row, sorry guys. The second thing that happens which causes him to switch sides is that, well, basically he just hangs out with them. Now, that may seem kind of simple, but once again, that's the problem. You see, John Logan is telling a story of a man who switches sides to another culture. There are 2 ways he could have done this. He could have either made this about a man who doesn't like said culture, but learns about them and eventually accepts them, or he could have told the story of a man who never really thought about different cultures as anything more than a job, but finally decides to open himself up to one. Logan has chose the latter strategy, and that was a mistake. Because Nathan Algren has no preconceptions about the samurai specifically, the whole impact of him joining them is totally disarmed. It could have been them, or it could have been any other culture that captured him. That it was the samurai now becomes incidental. Excluding the obvious examples like the Nazis or the Ku Klux Klan, if you hang out with any other culture long enough, you are probably going to have a perspective change. So Algren's transformation is more the next logical step than it is a personal revelation. And this is brought down even further by the fact that it also could have been anyone that took his booze away. This movie is called The Last Samurai, but the way Logan is telling the story, he could have just as easily called it, "Okay, I'll go with you guys then." Now, having said that, this portion of the film, while being too long and repetitious, is not a total loss. The Nathan Algren character side of this story doesn't work, but the Katsumoto side does. Katsumoto is an excellent character played by the always amazing Ken Watanabe. Katsumoto spared Algren's life because he saw something in him when he was fighting off the samurai, and though he brought him here under the guise of knowing him as an enemy, in reality, he really wants to know him as a man. In fact, this movie would have been helped tremendously if it was told from the Katsumoto perspective rather than Nathan Algren's. Katsumoto sees a lot of himself in Algren. They are both students of war, both warriors themselves, and both have either lost or are in danger of losing something. Character problems or not, Nathan Algren and Katsumoto do have a real chemistry, which is shown off nicely in this part of the film. Many of their interactions play well, particularly a conversation about General Custer. Katsumoto also strikes a good balance between being the leader of a rebellion and the leader of a community. This presents yet another element to the screenplay that is good in and of itself, but wasn't put in the right place in the final draft. It is even said that despite all the violence, Katsumoto believes his actions are in the service of the Emperor rather than fighting against him. That seems a bit odd considering his actions are in total conflict with the Emperor's wishes, but still an interesting aside. So after living with them and accepting their culture, Nathan Algren is transformed from being regarded as an unwelcome guest to a part of the community. Eventually his guards become comrades and his captives become family. During his last few days before the season changes, the community has a celebration of sorts and puts on a play. In what amounts to being one of the very first effective scenes in the film, the community gets ambushed in celebration. Katsumoto then transitions from community leader to leader of the rebels and defends his home. As he runs in to protect his family, he runs into Nathan, and for a split second you can tell he almost forgets that he isn't the enemy. A small point, but I really like the way this was done. Nathan and Katsumoto then fight side by side to defend what is now both of their homes. The following morning, Nathan approaches Katsumoto to talk about the attack.
Who sent those men to kill you?
I'm writing a poem about a dream I had. The tiger's eyes are like my own, but he comes from Rakvarsa deep and troubled the sea.
Was it the Emperor? Omura?
If the Emperor wishes my death, he has but to ask.
So it was Omura.
Okay, but Omura was the one who wanted Algren to help train the soldiers to fight against you in the first place. So in this case, what Omura wants and what the Emperor wants are totally inseparable. Obviously, the Emperor doesn't want you to fight against his wishes, and he wishes to convert the culture to the West. So you would die for the Emperor, but you wouldn't help him get the Coca-Cola brand into the stores. I'm confused. So Nathan and Katsumoto share a bit of well-written dialogue about life and death until finally this is said.
The Emperor has granted a safe passage to Tokyo. We leave tomorrow. Good. Good.
What? What the... What? Let me get this straight. These people have gone against the Emperor's wishes, killed his soldiers, ransacked his railroads, but as soon as the Emperor does nothing more than ask them to stop and come back, Well, they'll just go waltzing on back into town like nothing ever happened. Now, if Katsumoto's forces could have been stopped by the Emperor merely asking them to do so, then why did he send any forces against them at all? Why not just ask him to stop? Don't worry, I'm sure the rest of the film will make this all make sense. Welcome to part 3. So after the rebellion comes waltzing on back into town like nothing ever happened, Nathan returns to find that the band of peasants they were training are now a well-oiled militant machine, supplied with state-of-the-art weaponry and the best training Uncle Sam can provide. Now they can go kill those rebels, who were just hanging out in town like nothing ever happened. Well, maybe they can have better luck fighting the Emperor's next enemies. Unless he invites them over for tea, too. I wonder what you get for slapping the Emperor square in the face. Is it a gift basket? Anyway, so then Katsumoto and the Emperor have a dialogue wherein the Emperor condemns him for rising up against him. Katsumoto responds that he was only rising up against his enemies who advise him out of their own self-interest, and that if the Emperor still wishes his death, he need only ask for it. The Emperor declines, saying that he still needs his voice on the council. Yeah, because that's a guy you want on your council. I mean, it's not like he's going to do anything rash like sabotage the railroads like he already did or anything. Katsumoto insists that it is the Emperor's voice they need on the council, not him or any of his advisors. The Emperor responds by saying that he needs advisors that understand the modern world. This scene is well acted and well spoken, but I have 2 huge problems with the context. First, it is a shameless act of hypocrisy for Katsumoto to condemn the Emperor's advisors for advising him out of their own self-interest when that's exactly what he's been doing here. Everything Katsumoto has done in the film so far is out of his own self-interest. Granted, he believes that his interests are and should be identical with the common interests of his people, but they are nonetheless a fight for what he wants over the wants of others, including the Emperor. Second, and forgive me for sounding like someone who is irritated at the structure of this film being twisted into stupid in order to make the plot move, but isn't this conversation something that should have taken place before Katsumoto amassed an army to rise up against the Emperor and his advisors? One of the last things he says to the Emperor in this scene is, "You are a living god. Do what you think is right." Well, where the hell was that statement before you slaughtered armies and laid siege to the railroads? In fact, the Emperor flat out tells Katsumoto to tell him what he should do, to which Katsumoto responds, "I'm not the Emperor. You are. You have to decide this on your own." I'm sorry, Katsumoto, but bullshit. You've been telling the Emperor what he should do the moment you rose up against him and his wishes. Only you've done it in a stupid order. Attack first, advise later. This film is trying to have it both ways on everything here. Katsumoto is against the Emperor, but he isn't. He doesn't want to influence the Emperor, but he does. So meanwhile, Nathan sits down with Omura, who tells him that Katsumoto can't be allowed to recruit more followers to his cause, and that if he can't stop him tonight on the council, he wants Nathan to stop him in battle with the new well-trained army.
And with these new weapons, you will crush him.
But they're all just hanging out in town right now. Why don't you just go arrest them? Nathan doesn't directly refuse, but his disdain for Omura and what he wants to do is clear, and he leaves. Omura then says the following.
後をつけろ。勝本に近づくようなら、切れ。
Okay, now try saying that about everyone else in the rebellion. I mean, if you're okay with assassination tactics and you already have the rebellion here, what do you need the army for? So as Nathan walks down the street, Wormtail tells him that the Emperor has passed anti-samurai laws. Conveniently enough, a few military officers demonstrate this on the young man Nathan got to know up in the mountains. Now, in a non-retarded world, they all would have just likely have done their jobs, but the movie needs them to be jerks to let us know how jerky and poopy head what they're doing to the samurai is, so they all mock and ridicule him for no reason. Finally, they decide to chop off his hair, which is apparently a dishonor for a samurai. So let's see. How can they do this scene? I don't know, maybe a quiet tear running down his face as they cut off his hair, some somber music playing in the background? Of course not. This is The Last Samurai. We would never know this is supposed to be dramatic unless it's totally overdone. So there is no way they could have made this scene come across without him going, So after this, Katsumoto goes to the council meeting where Omura is still promoting an alliance and integration with the West. Katsumoto enters, and already there seems to be a problem. Swords are apparently forbidden in the council chambers in front of the Emperor, but Katsumoto insists that wearing the sword is a sign of respect, and then the scene goes like this. Give up your sword. No. Yes. No. Yes. No. Yes. No. Yes. All right, then you're under house arrest and will be executed. You have 609,000 hours before we kill you, which gives Nathan time to go to an exciting rescue. So here's the way things work as I understand them. Creating an uprising against a living god by slaughtering his armies and ransacking his railroads is punishable by being reinstated into the Emperor's council and roaming his streets freely, but not putting your sword down is punishable by death. After hearing that Katsumoto is going to be executed, Nathan then sets off to rescue him, but is ambushed by a few dudes. They outnumber him, but Nathan takes them all down because, in case you forgot, he's a badass. Wait, you guys aren't samurai? Then what the hell are you using swords for? All the other guards were using guns. I guess we wouldn't be as impressed with Algren's stunt work if they had just shot him. So Nathan and a lot of Katsumoto's friends break him out, but in the rescue, Katsumoto's own son is mortally wounded. Okay, well, you guys did a pretty good job with the goodbye scene between father and son, so let's just give him a quiet death and move. Good riddance. So on their way home, Katsumoto tells Algren that the Emperor could not hear his words and would not listen. Well, yeah. That's because you didn't say anything to him. You were too busy trying to hold on to your sword. If you had just stuck the damn thing in the corner, then at least you might have been able to convince him with your words. So, I don't know, maybe put your sword down next time. Katsumoto considers killing himself in disgrace, but surprise, surprise, Nathan convinces him to gather their forces for a final showdown. Now, I know you're probably all thinking that this is going to be your standard final showdown scene with the smaller numbers leading them into a clever trap and charging into certain death with impunity, but, well, it is. The ending battle is basically a scene we've seen 100 times before. Captain Jerkface gets his comeuppance, Katsumoto dies in glorious battle, seeing his perfect flower before he does, and Nathan ends up being the one sole survivor. Not bad, just nothing special. Finally, in the end, Nathan approaches the Emperor and presents him with Katsumoto's sword. After a few words with him, the Emperor decides that the Japanese must hold on to their traditions because it is a part of who they are, and he denies the United States treaty at the last minute, proving that Nathan's theatrical repetition of a point in the end is always better than Katsumoto telling him this over and over throughout the whole movie in the first place. Thus ends The Last Samurai. The movie was simply underthought and overdone. We have kernels of good ideas that are not implemented well by anyone involved. In different hands, these ideas and issues could have been pulled off relatively well. In fact, I think this was the case with regard to Avatar. But this movie simply has it all, just in the wrong places. The end.